2 minutes in. So for those of you who have just joined us, my name is James Lovell. I work on the Pulsar team here at Pulsar HQ. I work on the business development team. Today for the webinar, I'm going to be talking to you about using social data for insightful content creation. And I encourage all of you, if you have a question at any point during the webinar, please do use the chat function within Zoom to ask me a question, which I'll cover at the end of the session. And I'll be able to go through your questions and answer each one of them individually. So feel free to do that. Okay, great. So let's get things started. So obviously here today to talk to you about social data and how you can use it to create insightful content. So who are Pulsar to start with? So here at Pulsar, we're obsessed with understanding human behavior. It just so happens that we use social data as a data point to do that. So a little bit about us, we've been around for about 6 years now, and we provide a platform and also a research consultancy to help you to uncover consumer, customer, and human insights across the online and the social media space, allowing you to put science behind your business making decisions. So that decision might be around, a campaign, or in this case, which I'm going to talk to you today, it might be around a piece of content which you're producing internally at a brand or for a client if you work at an agency or a consultancy. So that's a bit about Pulsar and who we are. But why social data? Why would I encourage or urge a marketeer, a content strategist, a planner, or a marketing guru? Why would I urge them to use social as a form of research? Well, for me, it comes down to 5 unique points that make social data really relevant as a research point to allow you to uncover insights about an audience. So to start with, it's quick. So number 1, it's quick. You can, on not just our platform, but other platforms out there, you can build a research string, analyze an audience, say for example within football, and uncover things within minutes. Our platform updates within 60 to 90 seconds, so really giving you that lightning quick access to insights very, very speedily. So that's the first thing, speed. The second is it's granular. So using social data, especially on Pulsar, what you can do is you can use our filter system to filter down by 32 different ways. So those might include by a keyword or by gender, by age through Twitter bios. You can uncover and segment, slice and dice your data set to focus in on a particular group or a particular trend in more detail. So number 2, it's granular. And then number 3, it's vast. It's a huge data set. So Twitter is the largest open source data set in the world. And then things like Instagram, people are sharing more than 500 million images on Instagram daily these days. So it really allows you to uncover insights across a vast domain of data and understand people in better forms. So that's the third thing. Number 4, it's quite cheap. So if you compare accessing social data insights or social media research when comparing to other forms of research, for example, offline methods like surveys or focus groups, it's actually far more cost effective. So depending on which area of the platform you subscribe to on Pulsar, usually on our rate card, we'd start at around £9,000 for the year. Whereas a focus group or a survey could be vastly more than that. So that's the 4th reason why I choose social data. And then the final one, which I think for me is definitely the most valuable as a researcher, is it's volunteered information. So whereas with a focus group or a survey, you're asking a question of the people that you're focusing for that group, with social data, people are volunteering information. They are, in fact, these days, very easily sharing data points around particular topics or sharing images on Instagram around their favorite ice cream or food they've eaten that day. So it's volunteered information. So those 5 points for me are why, as a researcher, as a marketeer, reaching out for some research to help create content, I choose social data. Awesome. That volunteering can often take quite hilarious forms through social. Often social media posts can be pretty hilarious. I've got a quite nice example for you next up. So what I'm going to show you next is a post from the British Milk Council's Twitter page. So this was posted by the British Milk Council on April the 16th. And what we can see here is, what it says is, just being called into the office to be told that British Milk Council is shutting down all channels. I'm out of a job. Something about misuse of data higher up. F that. I've changed the password and they're not having the account back. So it turns out the social media manager at the British Milk Council has been fired. However, he's got the passwords to the Twitter page. So the British Milk Council managed to get access to the page and responded with, Jason, log out of this account now or I'll contact Twitter support. Okay, things are getting serious, Jason. What are you doing here? And then he responded with probably the best comeback I've ever seen on social media. The British Milk Council uses Windows XP. An amazing put down from Jason. I congratulate you. And then he continues on the page to go through a tirade attacking the British Milk Council, which included things like this post here. Traffic alert. One of our vans has blown its load all over the road. Please make alternate arrangements. Hilarious. There's been a milk spillage. So this continues, and I urge all of you to have a look at Buy British Milk. It's an absolutely hilarious page. I'm going to ruin it for you all now when it comes to content. This is a parody account. So the British Milk Council have been very clever here with their content, very clever with their guerrilla type campaign here, and playing on the emotions of the social media reader. It's quite likely that someone who'd been fired by a company might take to social media to vent their anger. So the British Milk Council have been very clever here, creating the right content aimed at the right audience. Awesome. So I've shown you something quite amusing, which shows you kind of the volunteering around social data. Next up, I'm going to talk to you a bit about the methodology around our approach at Pulsar and why we do what we do. So we actually did some of our own research here at Pulsar a few years ago now. So what we wanted to understand and to find out was, why do people use our product? Why do people use social data to create meaningful content? And we did a big piece of work, research project, looking at agencies, brands, content creators, planners, analysts, marketers, both current clients and also non-clients, to understand from them, why are they using social data to back up their insights? And from that research, these are kind of the main areas that we took from that there's a kind of 4-step process to using data in general to back up your findings when it comes to content creation, which we've called the funnel idea, the methodology behind it. So generally, if you're creating content for a client, you'd start by receiving a brief, which you can see at the top there with that lovely coffee icon. Of course, you've got to turn straight for caffeine once you've received a brief from a client. So that brief will probably contain, wish lists, things that they might want you to do, and also what they might try to find out. So you then probably turn as a content creator and go, okay, well, what do I know about this audience which I can use to create and satisfy this brief? And that's where we'd move on to that find stage, which is top right. So we're starting by finding a trend which we can use for that content creation, which you might use Pulsar for, or you might use other forms of research. You might use focus groups, you might use surveys, etc. So this is where we can really understand the context of the subject. We can identify insights to explore, which we might want to move in further detail, and understand those behaviors and the moments that people are talking about that particular trend which we're going to use. Awesome. So that's step 1. And number 2 is focus. So what we can do is, if we found a trend, and let's say, for example, we were told that we needed to sell more units of water from a water company. We might want to find a trend within water right now. I used one really general within maybe say clean water and green water. What you could do is you could focus in on that trend using the platform to explore the angle, to assess whether this is an actual insight, and develop a creative strategy. Okay, nice. So we've focused in on that trend, we've honed in on it, and then thirdly, we can then immerse ourselves in that trend to uncover details that will bring color to the content, the campaign that we might be running, to understand if that behavior is true or not, understanding those triggers. And then finally, which is the golden kind of finish line, we can then show findings back to either the client or internally, if we're a content marketeer, to show why this is bulletproof strategy and why we should be pushing out that content. So I'm going to lend, as I go through next, I'm going to lend back to this methodology which we've come to based on some of our own research here at Pulsar. To do that, I'm going to give you a hypothetical scenario, a scenario that might be true, but in this case it is not. So to do that, I'm going to talk to you about a gin brand. And that gin brand is based on the fact that, to start with, my little cousin is obsessed with unicorns, absolutely obsessed. She has unicorn wallpaper, unicorn products, unicorn duvet cover. I've never seen a room more unicorn than anything else. So I kind of wanted to play on that for this, this example, which I'm going to use, which I'm going to push through this funnel methodology. So the CEO of Unicorn Tears Gin Liqueur, you've just won them as a client. They're a new client which you're excited about, and the CEO of, or the managing director of Unicorn Tears comes into your office and says, "Hello, content marketing team, help me sell more Unicorn Tears gin." Okay, at this point you might think, well, this is a big ask from Unicorn Tears. That's a pretty niche product, but there must be something we can do here. Maybe we can find some angle which we can push out content for them. So you obviously, before you start to build that strategy to find that out, you probably respond with something like this: "Sure, we can help you. So what's trending in gin at the moment?" Perfectly normal question for you to ask a client back, to uncover some things that you might be able to use for that content marketing, at which he will respond in this case with, "I don't know." Take a deep breath here as a content marketeer. Now, it's unlikely that they're never going to know anything about their brand. Turns out Unicorn Tears also creates you to have a lack of imagination. But this is an extreme case. So it's likely that they're not going to know nothing about their brand, but it's likely they're not going to know the full picture about gin or what's happening out there in the gin space. So at this point, you probably want to turn to some research methods. How can we understand what's trending in the gin category right now? Okay, great. So how can we do that through a social audience intelligence platform? How can we do that through Pulsar? So I used our platform to uncover some insights within gin, which we might want to run with. So to start with, remember the four points of methodology: find, focus, immerse, and show. So to start with, we need to find our trend using Pulsar. How can we find interesting points around the audience moments and behaviors? So to do that, I set up this string, which you can see here on Pulsar. So what we're looking at here is 4 individual keywords tracking gin, hashtag gin o'clock, and gin and tonic. Nice. And then I built that search across these sources. So not only are we looking at the social media sources like Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, but also across online media as well with blogs, forums, and news. Nice. So then what I did is I used our cluster system on Pulsar to filter down the information. Remember that granular value to social data. I filtered down this information based on some interest points that I wanted to curate myself. So I built these in our cluster section. So for example, at the top here, we've got the moments that people talk about drinking gin. Now this isn't groundbreaking, but we can see on the right here that celebration, party, and cocktails are the top 3. We'd definitely expect that to be the case. Alcohol online is a very positive thing. People love celebrating and talking about it. But what was more interesting within this piece of research, which I did, was where people are more likely to talk about drinking gin. And it's clear as day to see that gin tastings as an audience segment has taken over. And this timescale, by the way, is in the past month. So this is on trend. We're showing here that gin tastings is huge. That, I don't have a slide for this, but was a lot smaller when we looked at it 6 months ago. So this is a very new active trend, gin tastings. Okay, cool. So, well, that might be something that I might want to come back to the CEO of Unicorn Tears with. Why don't we create a series of gin tasting events, and we could provide you with the social and online content around it? Great, nice idea. But we're into understanding what content to produce. So what content should we produce around it? So to do that, we want to, remember, focus in on our trend. So how can we focus in on this gin tasting trend? To do that, through the platform, it's very easy to do. You can just click on that audience segment. So just click onto that gin tasting column, and it's going to take us through to the verbatims. A shout out to GDPR for the red highlighted areas to remove those people, which you can now do fully on the platform, of course. Now, by focusing on the platform, on the trend, we can now see that this is a real trend. Yes, so gin tasting in Cardiff, that is happening. We can see that this is in Australia. No one cares about this at all, though. There's been no engagements. But you catch my drift, that what we're seeing here is we can actually dip in and understand the real verbatims of what's happening within this gin tasting trend. So it's real. Okay, we focused in on it. Okay, now let's we want to start to immerse ourselves. So remember that third point. We need to immerse ourselves in this trend to uncover these details and these themes. So how can we do that? Well, next up, what I did is I then applied that gin tasting filter to understand the trending keywords that were happening within this trend. So this is a tree map. What it's showing us is on the right here, this is the most prevalent keyword that people are using when they're talking about gin tastings, because I've got that filter on. Okay, interesting. So across these sources, we can see that, yeah, as we'd expect, we've got gin tastings, okay, gin tonic, yep. What might be more useful for our campaign, our content to provide for the client, for the CEO of Unicorn Tears, are these hashtags like Ginstagram, Gintastic, and Ginspiration. Okay, great. So now what this is doing is it's surfacing organically these hashtags that this audience is using, which we should use for our content. Excellent. We'll get more eyeballs, more resonation, and a higher engagement. Cool, so we've got the keywords, but I'm thinking, if we're going to do some gin tasting content, it's also, gin is, it's quite positive. It's also very visual. We might want to provide with some images for this search as well. So images for this campaign, for this content. So actually, before I do that, I might want to find out when people are talking about gin tastings. So this is not an image of the inside of my bathroom. This is telling us when the audience is active. So on the y-axis, we've got the day. On the x-axis, we've got the time. And the darker the tile, the higher the volume of conversation that's happening at that time. So it's clear as day to see that for gin tastings, it's definitely a Thirsty Thursdays conversation that kind of goes headlong into the weekend. Forget about Wednesdays. But, that's volume. So maybe, if we want to stand out from the crowd, maybe we want to do our content out on a Wednesday, because that's when no one's really mentioning gin tastings. So it's going to be less of I guess less of a over volume when it comes to gin tastings. Okay, so we know when to push out our content. We know which hashtags to use. And then I mentioned around images. So to build and to understand what images people are sharing, we've actually plugged in a different tool to help us to do that. So we've partnered up with IBM Watson for their visual recognition AI module. It's a deep learning module, and it allows you to quickly train and understand what image objects there are from the images in your data set. So the different sources that we can track images on Pulsar are Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. And I applied this visual recognition software to our gin search, which then visualized like this. So these are the most prevalent images that people are sharing when they share an image of gin in general. Now you'll notice that the top two are mixed drinks and cocktails. This isn't a groundbreaking insight. You know, when we get alcohol brands, people are turning to Instagram to share an image of their really lovely, dainty, cool, flowery cocktail on a Friday night. So that's not insight. But what you can do using Pulsar is that we could click on this cocktail trend and then push it back into that funnel. So before I do, actually, I've clicked on this cocktail to focus in on this trend. And we can see that, yeah, it's definitely a trend. People are loving to share these quite seasonal at times cocktail images with gin involved. But then I could push it back into the funnel with the filter on and visualize it by the different types of cocktails. So this might be more useful for a content marketeer. So what we're saying here is that punch is number 1, martini number 2, and a gin and tonic number 3. So what we're saying here then is that if people talk about gin and share images of cocktails, they're more likely to share an image of a cocktail with color in it than a colorless gin drink. So people are turning to color when it comes to Instagram. So if we want to incorporate or build content to go alongside this gin tasting event, we know the hashtags, we know when to push out the content, and we also know what images we should be using. Fantastic. So hopefully meaning that we can then come back to the CEO of Unicorn Tiers and go, hey, presto, I have a strategy that is worthwhile, that is going to gather high levels of engagement for your brand and help you to sell more Unicorn Tier units. Fantastic. So that is, that takes me to the end of my webinar. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me for 25 minutes. I urge you to ask any questions if you have them. It looks like someone's just asked a nothing question, which is great, but Mr. Blobby is one of my favorite characters from a childhood, so I'll go with that. But if you guys have any other questions, feel free to ask them now. Ah, nice. So we've got a question here. Could this method be applied for the B2B? Yes, it can. So it completely depends on what topic of conversation you're looking to track. So for example, with this idea within gin, we're getting large volumes of conversation. So it's very easy for us to understand the audience in an effective way. If you're working within the B2B within something like cybersecurity or fintech, you're going to get large volumes of conversation, which are going to be very useful for content. Especially within cybersecurity, it's an ever-evolving topic of conversation. So to understand the language and the context to create relevant content is very useful. And if you're looking for a topic that's maybe slightly smaller, the advantage with Pulsar is that we can run historical data. So we work with Rajapak, the packaging company, for example, and they want to know exactly when and how people are talking about packaging. The volumes are not huge. However, what you can do through Pulsar is just go back further to get higher volumes. So absolutely very effective within the B2B. Awesome. So again, thank you so much to all of you who attended the webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. Some great questions there coming in towards the end. Stay tuned for more webinars from Pulsar. And if those of you who aren't already clients, who'd like to see more of the platform, I do recommend clicking request a demo on the website, which will then proceed for you to be able to check out Pulsar from one of our business development team. Thanks so much for joining. Thanks, guys.